Good morning. How are you today? I'm Dale Hendrickson with Frohlich from Yale University. We wanted to give basically a 5-year report of where we've been since we started with the IT guidance process, as we call it at Yale, but more commonly called governance outside. I know governance is on a lot of people's minds these days, but trust me, this is a positive, not a negative. So if you'll bear with me, 5 years ago, I gave a presentation. It was the very beginning of the pandemic. It was April. C&I was virtual at that point. Like a lot of people, I tried to take up a hobby of drawing. Obviously, it wasn't very successful, but it has been a journey, so I thought we would dive in and talk about our experience at Yale. A quick background of Yale University Library. It's about 13 libraries, 12 of which are centrally administered, and then the law library is independent, although we have a very close relationship with law. Roughly a combined 600 staff across all the libraries. It's obviously one of the largest university libraries in the world. And we have extensive holdings. You can see that we have 5 million volumes, 190,000 linear feet of archival materials, as well as large amounts of data. When we say 1.6 petabytes, that does not include the redundancies, the backups, and other things. So we have a fairly extensive infrastructure there. Despite the size, I would like for you to approach this with an open mind and see if there are things that could apply to your institution or smaller institutions. I think some of the concepts that we present today can be applied at any size institution with a little bit of creativity and thought. So when we started this, we really were trying to figure out how to optimize IT resources. And one of the challenges that we identified is that clear decision authority wasn't available in the organization. It was always a struggle to find where a person could make a decision to move things forward. There were a lot of committees, a lot of discussions, but how could we consolidate that and clarify where decision-making was actually empowered to make decisions? We wanted to make sure that we were allocating the scarce resources of the library on the most important initiatives, really focusing on the strategic direction of the organization and where it wanted to go. We also wanted to make sure that we were transparent, structured, and equitable in our approach. When we started this process, it seemed like some units were rich in their ability to use IT and others were not. So we wanted to make sure that when we were allocating those resources, it was equitable across the organization, as well as, focusing on the strategic aspect of the organization. And then we wanted to make sure that it was a lot of clarity about what we were working on, so that people understood when library IT said, no, not now, that people understood why and where their priority or their request or their proposal fit into the overall queue of activities within the library. And then we wanted to make sure, of course, at the end of the day that we had client satisfaction at a high level, that we were delivering as we promised to the rest of the organization. One of the core foundations that we developed that built out the overall guidance process was the concept of a service domain. So what we did is a deep analysis on all of the applications that we were running and how they all fit together and fed up into an overarching service area. So with that, we built out associated advisory groups that were tied to each service domain. And with those service domains, we made sure that IT was a part of it, but not necessarily driving it. And then actually we were deliberate in making sure that IT was not driving those advisory groups, but we wanted to make sure that at least IT was present. And then we wanted to map those service domains into the visibility so that people understood how each component of these different service domains interconnected with our service delivery of the overall library. And we wanted to make sure that it was tied to the strategic directions and the tactical directions and regarding what was most important to the library. So with this, we identified some of the major areas of the library, and we broke them down into 15 areas of service domains. So if you'll see, the main point is an overarching, basically an AUL's area of responsibility is what that came down to. And then underneath that, we identified core service domains within those areas. Now, one of the things that has changed since this system or this process was originally developed is there's been significant reorganizations within the library. I don't know whether it's true, but I would like to believe that some of the work that we did by developing this overall guidance and governance structure started to reveal some of the organizational complexities that had developed over time. One of the things we realized early on is that oftentimes there was not one decision maker other than the UL. So we had to get all of those people in the room to sit down and be able to have a conversation and come to a decision point, which was often very difficult because someone would say, oh, that person needs to be in the room and they're not here. So part of the design was to make sure that everyone related to that service domain in order to make decisions or move things forward was in the room so that we could accelerate the process. This is just an example of some of the work that we did to break down and then build back up the service domains. So you can see that at the top level is the AUL level. Underneath that is the service domain, and then below that are sub-service areas and associated applications. And obviously you can see there was quite a lot, and these lists are cropped off at the bottom of the slides because it was fairly extensive. At the time, we identified over 120 applications that we were running in the library, and then we were trying to stitch those all together in a logical structure that made sense within the service domain itself. So the overall process and the roles and the responsibilities within the IT guidance process at Yale, we started off with the concept of the advisory groups, but we soon learned that there were other committees and other task forces that really needed to be included in the overall process. So those groups would come up with a proposal or a recommendation that would then go to a champion. And then by our structure, originally, due to the complexities of the organization, sometimes we had multiple AULs having to sponsor each one of those service domains. That has since been resolved. If we have multiple ULs, now it's a deliberate decision, not a necessary decision. So that was a really step forward. Those AULs, those champions, then bring those ideas from those groups forward to the IT steering committee for approval or denial. And then if it is approved, making sure that those projects or those proposals were adequately resourced, as well as where it fits into the priorities of the organization. Once that is done, it's handed back to the advisory groups or the implementation teams to execute. One of the things that has really been a valuable component of this is the amount of autonomy this has allowed that execution phase, those people that are participating in the execution, they have a high degree of autonomy to do the work that they need in order to accomplish what they've requested from and which was approved and funded. Now, with that, we've soon learned that we needed to define a proposal process. How do you get from the conceptual idea through to the IT steering committee and then on to the execution component? So we came up with some criteria. Now, these are not, all of these items do not have to be met, but these are kind of the filter that we run through when we're looking at whether something needs to come up through the ITSC or whether it's something that we can just take care of because of the scale is small enough that it really should just be part of our daily work. So we wanted to make sure that it was over 75 hours of IT time that was required. We were concerned about the visibility of the community. If this maybe didn't require that many hours of IT, but it would have a huge impact on the users of the library, we wanted to make sure that it got that level of visibility within the organization. What was the overall impact? Sometimes, again, it may have not required a lot of IT, but it required a huge amount of culture change or process change. If that was the case, we wanted to make sure that it had that oversight and that approval by the IT steering committee. And then the level of effort outside of library IT, again, when this was developed, it was really focused on that scarce resource of IT. But over time, we realized as we got better at this, that we really needed to start to consider the time of those people that were really driving and the reason why the projects were being done. So there were challenges, right? And these are the things that we heard at the very beginning, the bureaucracy, it's going to slow things down. Well, what we found is that we overcame these challenges rather quickly. The overall design was for quick decision-making. The IT steering committee meets twice a month. So a proposal could theoretically be developed at the beginning of the month, and by the middle of the month, if there's room on the agenda, it could be approved in 2 weeks later. That doesn't happen. We all work in libraries. We know that it takes a little bit of time, but it's quick. It can be, and sometimes it does move really fast. One of the great things that happened as we started delivering through this process, trust increased in the organization to the point where we never heard about the challenges. In fact, it got to the point where it was recognized that IT was a constraint on the ambitions of the organization. So requests for IT personnel and financial resources were not coming from IT. They were coming from those units that we were supporting. And they realized that in order to do the work that we found important, IT had to be staffed and resourced at the level that was required. And then it was really great to see our librarian colleagues advocating for more staff in the IT organization in order to fulfill the ambitions, again, of the organization. With that, I will turn it over to Ray to talk about some of those impacts.
Yeah, thank you, Dale. Good morning, everyone. Ray Frohlich. Nice to be here. So let's take a minute and look back on the library IT organization back about 5 years ago or so. You don't have to read the detail here, just each box represents a person. We were 27 staff, right? A distributed IT unit at Yale, reporting up to the university librarian. And we had kind of 4 major areas of work, right? There was the enterprise applications group, endpoint, our DevOps and engineering teams, as well as our engineering team. Fast forward to today, we've grown quite extensively, and we're very privileged in that way. We're now about 40 staff. To Dale's point, the library leaders found that there was great value in, as we were expanding our library services, IT underpins a lot of that, so we needed additional staff to execute on that work. The big orange box in the middle, that's really a new grouping of people in the client services team. The type of role that most of the people have in that group is technical lead, which I'll speak about in a moment. We also made a deliberate move to take our project management staff that were dedicated 100% to that type of activity and making a project management office. So the tech lead, you might find that these responsibilities on the right are distributed across multiple people in your organization. You might have folks with titles like service owner, technical program manager, maybe domain or platform lead. There's a lot of overlap in this space. Perhaps you have technical leads yourselves. But these individuals really allow us to develop a tremendous amount of trust, collaboration, and ensure customer service excellence in the work that we do. So they're embedded deeply in the different domains that they support, right? They translate business needs into technical solutions. At our library, much like I'm sure at yours, a lot of our projects are cross-functional, cross-departmental, and these people help to coordinate a lot of those activities, making sure that what department leaders, maybe external IT vendors are all kind of brought along and engaging in whatever the initiative is. And importantly, in the context of IT governance, these people serve a key role of being the members of their associated advisory group, that kind of trusted leader in IT that's helping, hopefully at the inception of a project idea, they're scoping it, consulting, being that trusted partner. Here's an example of a tech lead we're hoping to post in the next 30 to 60 days. So keep an eye out for it. But it's the technical lead for digital collections and preservation. You can see how this particular role maps into responsibilities that we have for technical leads in general. But in brief overview, this person is responsible for core systems supporting digital collections, including access, ingest, and preservation. So there are probably a dozen or 24 applications that they'll have responsibility for, both front-end digital collection systems, AV streaming platforms, as well as back-end digital preservation solutions. So let's touch on for a moment just the role of project management in our project management office. So right now we have 2 FTE dedicated to this activity. Up until recently, we had another 1.5 FTE in contractor support. In pulling these folks together and making a unit and working to mature their practices, number one, management in the library gets some really great strategic oversight, right, in terms of project portfolio management. So it gives us visibility into all the projects that IT is working on, monitoring for resource constraints and risk, and gives us, good sense of what's to come and how to prioritize future work. Dedicated project leadership, right? These folks are in high demand. Our top priority projects right now is our ALMA implementation, which is going live July 9th. The folks on this team are mostly dedicated to that exclusively. But much like with the technical leads, they're also doing distributed project work, right? Pulling together folks from around the university to execute on important work. But we recognize the fact that we don't have enough project managers to manage our projects. So what do? We look to others. Our technical leads are a good example. Maybe they put on a project manager hat, 10, 15, 20% of the time. Perhaps our librarian colleagues elsewhere in the library do this as well. We want to make sure that, everyone isn't trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to project management, introducing their own practices and tools. We want to establish some best practices, some great tools, and also some consulting assistance. And that's what the project management office does to support project management activities across Yale Library. Just a brief note about infrastructure. I think this is important because we run a variety of different applications and systems and infrastructure, but largely for our custom and community-built platforms, like our Discovery platform, like our digital collections system. We've spent the last 5 years really maturing what we're doing in this space to make us more agile, flexible, ensure security, do more with what we have to offer. And you'll notice that a lot of the slide really focuses on using a lot of AWS capabilities and features, right? So we matured our development and deployment pipelines, our integration and development pipelines to ensure that we can push out code more routinely across multiple platforms. Our DevOps and infrastructure team really leveraging infrastructure as code in the last several years so that we can push out more routinely infrastructure to support this code base, right? And ensure consistency. That's a key point. Application hosting, we've been leveraging Docker and containerization now for several years for some of our key systems, using things like Amazon ECS. More recently in our Alma migration, we're starting to leverage AWS Batch, which is like a routine, kind of like a cron job type solution. As we're moving away from our legacy ILS to this new product, we're pushing a lot of those routines over to that solution. AWS Cognito. This is a huge effort, right? Single sign-on. University provides single sign-on for our Yale folks, our Yale community. But especially in our special collections areas, we support researchers from around the globe, and we have 55,000 to 60,000 researchers that we need to support, provide access to systems, and that's where AWS Cognito plays a huge role in providing access to those folks that aren't necessarily a part of our central authentication solution. CloudWatch Dynatrace, great for monitoring, and not really late-breaking news or anything revolutionary, but when it comes to preservation storage, as Dale mentioned at the start, we have a huge footprint of managed preservation content that we need to be accountable for. We heavily leverage AWS Glacier to store this content, as well as tape-based systems. In this case, we have a Quantum StoreNext solution where we're putting many petabytes of data as well. So with that, I'll turn things back over to Dale. Thank you.
So in the past 5 years, I'd like to highlight some of the things that we've accomplished through this IT guidance process or the governance process that we put in place. To say that some of these things wouldn't have happened without this, that's unrealistic. However, I think you'll see by the volume and the scale, I think this process really enabled the organization to move much more quickly and be much more ambitious than it would have been otherwise. So I also wanted to highlight, before we dive in, an example of how this works. So these list the 10 items that have been vetted and approved and prioritized in ordinal order by the IT steering committee. This has been a very critical component to the success of the overall guidance process, governance process. What that ordinal list means, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you are number 10, that work is not being done on your project. However, if we have resources that are assigned to number 4 and to number 10, and we wind up in a situation where 4 is at a critical point, we know that we can easily redirect those resources to number 4 from number 10. That has been critical for us. It doesn't require us to go back and negotiate with the advisory groups. It doesn't require us to go back to the IT steering committee and say, what do you want us to do? We've got a conflict. We've already established the order that we will focus on when there is a conflict. And again, I do want to emphasize, very rarely have we experienced a conflict, but when we have, this has really been helpful for us. And it also helps with communicating to the rest of the library. This is what LIT and the organization is working toward, and this is what we consider the most important items on the list. So I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we've accomplished in the past 5 years. These are not all of it. It's not a comprehensive list, but some of the big ones. At the very top is the digital collection system. This was a greenfield effort. This was really our first project that went through the IT guidance process, governance process, and wound up being delivered about less than a year after we formally launched the process. It was it was a difficult project. It was also a high dollar. The organization committed, multiple six-figure dollars with consultings and other resources to be able to make that happen, and we were able to deliver. Part of the reason we did a greenfield is that Yale being Yale, of course, they thought they do things uniquely, so any kind of commercial platform was not going to fulfill the needs. However, with that, it's been an incredible platform for us, and integrating IIIF and a lot of the more advanced features that are available. All the way down through our latest implementation of Dataverse, so we're bringing up our own Dataverse instance. Again, this unique Yale thing, the idea of using Harvard's Dataverse is really not palatable to most of the group. So it's been a major effort for us. Some of the applications that were part of those projects, Metadata Cloud and Single Sign, as Ray mentioned. Metadata Cloud allows us to create a pulling the applications apart and creating a central hub for sharing metadata between the various applications that we've developed. So this allows us to basically have, as Ray mentioned, we're moving to Alma. We're able to disconnect our Voyager system and connect in Alma to Metadata Cloud. So instead of having to reconnect it to all of the other systems that are feeding the Metadata Cloud, we can just connect into that one platform. So that allows us a lot of flexibility when it comes to upgrading and changing our infrastructure, and we're able to take advantages. Same thing with single sign-on. It serves all of the applications that we're working on. A big one for us, of course, was Lux. That was a great product that came out of our efforts through this guidance process and our commitment. And of course, the LSP migration and integrations activity that we're doing going on now. There are other applications there as well. Some of them you may have recognized. I know that in other library conferences, some of these applications have been highlighted. What's to come? We're finally getting to the point where we can dive into research data and support, which is a major issue at Yale. We're way behind in this area as compared to probably most of you. So a huge effort is being focused on that. Digital workplace, what does that mean? Digital workplace is what happens behind the scenes. We found that I joke that when I arrived at Yale in my role, I wanted to inventory the applications that we were using so that, I could get an idea of how we were working and how we were collaborating. I have yet to find an application we are not running. So the effort of the digital workplace group is to narrow that tool set down, take advantage of some of the tools and services that our central IT organization provides, and create hopefully a more seamless environment for sharing and collaborating. Then all things AI, of course, special collections. We have a lot of provenance information that is scattered in physical and digital forms across the archives, and we need to pull that all together. You can see some other activities that we're working on too. So we're continuing to mature the process. We're still working to further integrate the governance process into the special collections committees. That's really been a maturing of that organization as well. There's been a lot of change, a lot of consolidation in the special collection space at Yale. So there's been organizational, activity going on, and now it's time to really make the effort to bring those into the governance. Research, learning, and growth and integration. Research and learning is the outreach component of the library. So we're trying to figure out how to better support our outreach librarians as they pursue their work with our faculty and our students. Other overall improvements in the process, as well as working to move the AGs from this IT focus to really moving into what are we trying to accomplish as an organization, and having IT integrated into that. So when it first started, it was all about IT. And we've actually had some of the AGs move away from that IT focus and really focus on the services that the library is providing and having IT embedded in it. And we would like to see all of the advisory groups move to that model so that instead of seeing it as a standalone, that it's actually part of the organization. And we want to be seen as partners and enablers as opposed to a provider of services. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you for your feedback, your thoughts, and any questions you might have about our experience and perhaps how we might be able to think about how it could be applied to smaller organizations. So one of the things I do want to say, this is my third ARL, by far the largest. However, I started out at the University of New Mexico, which is a highly resource-constrained organization, and I believe that a lot of these concepts could have been applied there as well.
Thank you so much. I'm John Borwick from the University of Washington. I'm interested in if you could speak to if you've observed that you now have new capabilities or affordances that allow the libraries to do things it might not otherwise have been able to do. For example, in talking with advancement, maybe partnering with central IT, otherwise how this has kind of impacted the libraries, I assume very positively, the library's ability to engage in making new commitments or otherwise being able to maybe not be on the back foot, when talking with other groups. Love to hear about any new kind of abilities this has enabled you to have.
Sure. I'll focus on our relationship with central IT. We ride heavily on the infrastructure, the core infrastructure supported by our central IT organization. In the past, before the structure was in place, specifically with the tech leads, many members of the library were reaching out directly to the IT organization. So that created a great deal of confusion and overlap in work. Our IT organization is great, so they want to help. So someone would call and make a request and they'd say, yes, we'll do it, not realizing that someone 3 offices over made a similar request and they offered a different solution. By having this structure in place with the tech leads, those tech leads act as the broker. So they between the central IT organization and the ITS. Now we still have some elements that are going to their favorite person, and those are things that we'll continue to work on, but that has been a major benefit for us as well. As far as outside, we're still trying to mature that process. And I definitely, when we start to get into the research data and support, I can see us working much more closely with our VPR and more directly with our faculty and other organizations around campus. And I think by having that tech lead structure in place, they'll become familiar with the person that they need to talk to and to deal with. So yeah, thank you.
Kara Watley, the University of Missouri. So I'm really excited to learn about the work that you all have done, because I feel like it not only applies to IT, but any areas that are sort of in the organization that are kind of overburdened with, that end up being the roadblock to projects just because we don't have enough resources. I was counting up the number of library IT folks that we have in our organization, and I think we've got about 13. And I don't think that we're going to go from, 13 to 40 anytime soon. So I am interested in kind of thinking through your process and how we might be able to apply it into a small organization. And I was just wondering if you had any documentation that you could share with us about what all you do.
Sure, please email me or Ray directly, and we'll see what we can put together.
Okay.
One of the things that helped a lot for us is we began to establish the tech leads as kind of the service owner, the person that's responsible for making sure that the systems are up and running and doing what they're supposed to do. And then we moved to the idea of a product owner. And our product owner, we really emphasize, should be a librarian or someone in those areas that understand why the application exists and who that application serves. Of course, the tech leads know that too, but we need that representation from the library to tell us what they really want and the direction that they would like to see us to go. I also know that a lot of other organizations aren't developing their own. They're really dependent on their vendors. And I believe there's a similar model that you could build, assuming that your vendor is your IT organization, and really trying to partner with them and bring them in to and establishing that product owner role, however you want to define it, that liaises with your vendors. So we've got some ideas on that.
I'm Scott Pretter, University of Wisconsin-Madison. I wonder about tech debt. You're doing a lot of innovation and a lot of new services you're standing up that there isn't an application you don't run. How do you work technical debt and maintaining the ongoing services that you have into this process?
Right. That's another responsibility of the tech leads, is to make sure that their services are supported and functioning properly. And then we also we depend heavily on our DevOps and infrastructure team. One of the things this governance process has allowed is those teams, they know the priority list of projects that they're working on, and they do have gaps and time that becomes available. They are then able to focus on that technical debt. We had severe technical debt 5 years ago. I'm sure we still have it, but it's not at the level it was then, because the process created a degree of continuity and flow. And those gaps were able to be filled by taking care of things that were lingering that should have been addressed in the past. So, it was a side benefit. It wasn't something that we focused on directly, but by having this process in place, it allowed the technical team some capacity to address those other issues.
I hear some hints of other frameworks like ITIL and Agile. Did you all invest a lot of time in retraining or certification just so that you could all be starting from the same standpoint of why is IT governance important? Or did you feel like you had a staff that was coming to the table already with those concepts? And if you did invest, what are some places where those of us with smaller organizations can look to build some of those fundamentals?
So a foundational component of this was not to reinvent the wheel. So yes, you mentioned ITIL, you mentioned Agile. Those are the foundations that we built upon, and project management. I know Agile is a project management methodology, but we also incorporated some more formal project management structures and portfolio components. But all of those are standard, industry standard frameworks that we've tried to apply. We weren't super formal about the ITIL aspect. However, we do have a person within our IT that's focused on service management and that ITIL and using as much of the infrastructure that our central IT had, which was a very heavy ITIL organization as well. So we did take advantage of that. And then Agile, we sent people off for training for that. We developed that. And that was a hard one to overcome, that as you know, with Agile and with traditional project management, senior leaders love traditional project management because it gives them firm timelines, it gives them budgets, and it gives them a sense of where things are going, where Agile is this continuous kind of flexible environment. So part of the challenge was figuring out how to operate in Agile, but deliver, at least to the senior management, with a more traditional project management framework. So yes, we definitely used whatever standards we could find. We didn't want to reinvent anything.
Great presentation. Andrew White at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. You talked a little bit about what your interaction is with central IT, but I'm wondering how in this model you've built in the ability to be proactive or to be responsive in case there's some kind of emergency, say like you have to immediately pivot during a pandemic.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, that line that I showed looked very linear. However, one of the advantages of having the IT steering committee is that when the pandemic hit, they knew that they had to move fast in some areas. And it was also an opportunity because a lot of things that we had staged or ideas about that we wanted to do all of a sudden just had to be done. So what happened was the IT steering committee stepped in and they said, this is the priority. These are the things that we want you to work on. And we were able to put that into our priority list and work on them. So that was a way for the senior leadership of the library to intervene in that process and allocate resources quickly and efficiently. So I think it was a real advantage when the pandemic hit and other crisis situations that we might be in fairly soon. So yeah, I believe that it helped a lot when it came to being able to respond. Again, it seems bureaucratic, but the process is actually quite fast when it's when followed by design. And it's fairly responsive. And there is actually some capacity for innovation as well. One of our engineers basically had this idea about using AI to do dynamic translation and OCR, and then pre-faceted searches for a lot of our special collection materials. So that was an opportunity where I was able to take that very quickly to the IT steering committee and said, we have this idea, what do you think? And it was kind of, do you have capacity? Yes, do it. So, it gave it the visibility. It wasn't a skunkworks. So everyone knew what was going on and still be rather quick in our ability to deliver.
Ideal. Holly Jeffcoat, Southern Methodist. Just curious if you could speak to a little bit about communication, both internal to IT and then how you communicate out to the organization, kind of following on Terry's question about skill building, but also how you keep the flow going.
Right. So through that development, again, using ITIL and other types of frameworks out there, we implemented a weekly status letter that goes out to the entire organization that talks about what's upcoming, what we plan to do that week as far as maintenance. And then we report out every month on the ITSC activities as well. So there's a clear list of priorities that comes out every month, as well as what's been approved, what's been completed. So that's part of the communication aspect. Internal to IT, we've made an effort to and this is where the tech leads are very helpful because they not are only brokers outside of library IT, they're brokers within library IT as well. So they're coordinating the work with the engineers, with the DevOps, and with the front end folks as well. So by having those folks in that hub-like position, it really streamlines communication and keeps it consistent. So, yeah.
Hi, Tim Shearer, UNC Chapel Hill. Thanks. This is amazing. I have observed that product ownership and technical leads are key to success, basically, and often hard to select for. And so I was curious to hear you talk both about internal selection when the organization, say, wants you to choose a domain expert who might not have the skill set to be a product owner, and or how you're thinking about hiring and recruiting and retention. And then just as an aside, we were able to do agile training for potential product owners and product service areas, so not IT staff, and that ended up being really successful.
Yeah. I think we're way over, actually. But what we did was when we went to hire our tech leads, we looked for people with some technical competences, but we were really looking for those interpersonal skills. That was our priority. We believed that we could build their skill sets. And that's worked out very well for us. As far as the product ownership, that's a bigger challenge. We still have applications without product owners because of the very thing you were talking about. We don't have people that necessarily are stepping into it. We're trying to develop that. Yeah.
I'm so impressed with the idea of a weekly letter that goes out. I am wondering how you produce that.
Thank you, everyone. Please, we'll stick around if you want to. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did the tech leads produce, who does that? Because, truly, and maybe it's because you've worked on their interpersonal skills and have them able to write good things that explain what's going on in a way that's meaningful. But I'm really impressed that you're doing that, because there's an overhead to doing that much communication.
Yeah, that communication it's critical. It's important. So we really do invest a lot in getting that information out so other people in the organization know what's going on. So yeah, it is a pain. And sometimes people are like, why, it seems like an intrusion. We have a weekly change advisory board where most of the organization, LIT, gets together and works and communicates what they want to communicate out. And then the letter goes out based off of those communications. So it's built into the system, but it is overhead for sure. But it makes an incredible difference. Even though our open rates on our messages are not quite 600, at least we know that we've tried. Yeah, great. Thank you so much.